What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Rick Mast Show. I am Charlie Marlow. That is the great Rick Mast. I promise you, we're going to get to Rick's amazing 4th of July fireworks show a little bit later. But some fireworks on track, Rick, in Chicago with this street course race. And, I feel bad for Chicago also because, look, the Xfinity race was really cool, but 2 straight years, they have this great event, and they just get the worst weather luck for the second year in a row.
I know, it's a shame. I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, the Saturday's Xfinity race, man, it kind of showed what the track could do. Because, going into a road course last year, you're like, oh, a stupid road course because we watched that in F1, we watched it in IndyCar, they're terrible races. But they built passing zones into this track when they did it, right? So I'm like, well, we'll see. Well, we've had 2 years of friggin' rain, and I felt the same way. I felt bad for everybody associated with that race because I think just watching the Xfinity race, it would have been a hell of a cup race, right? But because of the rain, we just still was enough drama and enough excitement and all the stuff was going on. It was still a cool, and it was one of the most watched races too, Charlie. I don't know if you saw the numbers, but I forget what the numbers were. But I'm like, man, if this thing hadn't been raining, what could it have been? And it is what it is, though.
So what'd you think about Alex Bowman winning? And just big picture, here's a guy who's with arguably the best team in NASCAR, Hendrick Motorsports. And lately he's been kind of the one, I don't know if black sheep is a fair term, but you have Chase Elliott, who's won a championship, and Kyle Larson's won a championship, and William Byron is always winning races. And here's Alex Bowman finally breaking this, whatever it is, 80 race winless streak. And he's gone through a lot. He had the head injury. He had the wreck in his sprint car and messed up his back. So good to see Alex Bowman finally finding victory lane again.
Yeah, it is, Charlie. And I'll tell you something. Years ago when we was running the Busch Series, with my crew guys, we'd be traveling up down the roads in the middle of the night or stopping at the stores and getting gas and eating. And there's always one guy, Flop, and everybody knows Flop here from back in the day. But every time we get out of the truck, he'd be the last one getting out of the truck. When we go in the store, we'd come back to the truck, try to leave. He'd always be the last one. We were waiting on him. He's always the last one to get back in the truck, right? And if we went to the motel, leaving the track, going to the track, he was like, finally, one time I looked at him and said, Flop, why are you always so slow? Why are you the last one everywhere we go to do something? He said, Rick, somebody's got to be last. Somebody's going to be last at everything you do, right? And that's kind of where Bowman's been in this deal with the 4 Hendrick teams. He's been the last guy, and that's only because of where he's been running on the racetrack and the performance and how he's finishing. And for those guys to get a victory, I thought was pretty cool. I mean, you have to love somebody like Alex Bowman. I mean, what amazed me when they told his story after that race on social media, so people were talking about his story, which we all know, which was a typical broke racer trying to make it, right? And the struggles he had. And it amazed me the number of people that didn't know that story about Alex. They didn't know, what he went through and the whole deal to get there. In fact, quite a few people didn't even remember him being injured, right? Which tells me, man, is our fans' attention span this small, or do we have a bunch of new fans right now that doesn't know the Alex Bowman story? I don't know what it is, but I just thought it was so cool because of who the guy is and what he's been through and getting where he got to. And, we all want him to be we all want Alex Bowman to be a prolific winner. I think the sport's better off if he becomes that. So we'll see.
And what'd you think of some drama there on the cool down lap? You always got to have some drama with these races. And little bit of breaking news earlier today. We're recording here on Thursday. So Bubba Wallace was fined $50,000 by NASCAR. And he hits Alex Bowman on the cool down lap. Alex Bowman goes into the wall. And Alex Bowman discussed this and said, look, he basically cleaned out Bubba Wallace earlier in the race. And maybe it's because Bowman won and he was euphoric. He didn't seem to be really bothered by what happened with Bubba, and even said, look, during the rain delay, I shot him a text. I said, hey, man, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do that. But then Alex Bowman wins the race. And look, those two were right there battling basically for that last playoff spot. Bubba's still battling. Now, obviously, Alex Bowman is in, but always good to have a little drama, even if it's post-race. What'd you think? Big deal or not a big deal?
I honestly, Charlie, I didn't think there was that big a deal. A little bit surprised about the amount of the fine, and I guess I haven't heard and they'll put the statement out. I haven't heard the reasoning, but I guess it was the severity of the hit, right? Because I've had it done to me, and I've done it to other guys. The race is over, and I go up and I'll rub them, run into them a little bit, body slam them a little bit, just to let them know that I wasn't appreciative of whatever they did to me. And I've done it to other guys to some degree, but the severity of Bubba's hit, all right, how hard he turned into the car, I'm assuming that's the reason they did that, right? Because then we go later, we got Chase and Suarez doing whatever they did after the race. They took I think Chase took a little swipe at him, right? And there was no fine for that. So again, I guess it's the severity of it, and I just they're a couple things here. I think they're making an example. They're going to make an example. Don't be doing this anymore. We had a host of our last week or a couple weeks ago turned the dude, but that was under caution and all that. That was during the race. This was over with. Probably trying to make a statement. Don't be doing this, and it may be in races we have what we call the goodwill bank. You have this bank, and in your mind, each driver has a bank in your mind, and you have a goodwill part of that. So this driver out here, he's got a lot in the goodwill bank with me. If he hits me, yeah, okay, no big deal. Or that guy there's got nothing left in my bank and he touches me, he's going to get his ass wrecked back, right? Well, I think NASCAR plays that game a little bit too with the goodwill bank. What kind of trouble have you been in? What skirmishes have you caused? What's your track record? What's the record with doing things you shouldn't be doing? And I'm not. That may have come into play a little bit here with Bubba more than being just one isolated incident. I don't know that. I don't know what it is, but I need to get to Bubba, man. Bubba needs some. I was a big Bubba Wallace fan when he first came in, and it seems like Bubba gets himself in trouble, man. And for I don't know how to say it. It's like, and I'm sure with that team and their resources and everything that goes on, and Bubba's, he publicly talks about his depression issues he goes through, and working with the head shrinks and working on all that stuff. I'm just not 100% positive. Excuse me. I'm not 100% positive Bubba's got to the right head man yet, right? It's like, Bubba, come to Rockbridge Bass, spend 5 or 6 days up here in the mountains with me for like a week. You know what I mean? And when you leave, you might have a little bit different perspective on how you view the sport and how you view the world around the sport and how people view you and what's really important and not important. And, but I don't think mentally he's there yet. He's short fused, and that causes the immediate things you see is a short fusedness, a temper. And hey, man, that's fine. Everybody has those deals, right? But it keeps on getting Bubba in trouble, And anyhow, I think he should come to Rockbridge Bass. What do you think, Charlie? Maybe a week.
That would be fun.
Yeah,
that would be fun. Maybe we could also turn that into a podcast or maybe like a mini documentary. How about that?
Yeah, that would be cool. Now, some of it could not be recorded. Okay, there's some of it because there'd be some very hard talks at times. Yes,
for sure. All right, what's your just kind of big picture thoughts on street course racing? Do you like it? I really like kind of these one-off events. I don't know if they're going to do it forever. Maybe you do Chicago for 3 years. I'm sure they want to get into these big markets, probably maybe a street course race somewhere around Los Angeles. I know there's been discussion about somewhere around New York City. Obviously, NASCAR wants to get into these big, non-traditional NASCAR markets, the huge media markets. So what do you think about that, but also just street course racing? Should there be at least one street course every year? Should they do it every 3, 4, or 5 years? What do you think?
Charlie, my problem personally, I didn't like the lucky dog deal. All right, getting your lap back. I didn't like segment racing. I didn't like the points playoff championship deal. I didn't like any of this crap But guess what? I love that stuff now. All right, it's just the traditionalist in me that resisted whenever there's a change. That I'm just immediately said, no, I ain't gonna like it, right? And they do it, and you end up loving it, which I did. Street racing falls in that same category for Rick Mast, dude. I'm like, and I think the reason is you watch Indy cars, you watch F1 street racing. It helps them. I mean, you might as well watch grass grow. It's the most boring stuff to try to watch. A lot of these street races, and that's the take you have coming in when NASCAR decides they're going to go street racing. I'm like, because when they first announced Chicago, I'm like, oh crap, here we go with all these stupid boring races. Well, it turns out they purposely, as we stated earlier, they purposely built in passing zones in this track, right? We haven't got to witness it much last couple of years, really the true deal because of rain, although we watched passes. But the Xfinity, again, the Xfinity deal shows they can pass. And the thing about a road course is, and I think what makes most road courses boring or not good to watch is no passing, because there's no passing zones. And if you build street courses with passing zones, I think it works. I really think it works. And, the excitement of being in the middle of downtown Chicago and introducing the sport to people that have never seen the sport or have nothing to do with it, don't know anything about it, and numbers don't lie, Charlie. I mean, numbers don't lie. How in the hell did we get such a large TV audience? Yeah, it was on the main broadcast deal. I get that. There's no doubt. But still, people had to turn to that channel and stay on there and watch that race. So there's definitely an appeal there that maybe I don't fully comprehend yet, right? But definitely there's one there. And again, it brings new people to the sport. So, as long as they can pass each other and not follow the leader like those other stupid things do, I'm all for it, honestly. I really am.
Yeah, I think the last 2 years for the Cup race, we've kind of been robbed of some of the really picturesque visuals of downtown Chicago because it's so rainy. Now, if you watch the Xfinity race or the qualifying, so we're talking Saturday morning all throughout Saturday, some of those aerial shots and some of those drone shots where you saw the skyscrapers, you saw the lake, it was really, really cool. And I think some of that, it just doesn't translate as well when it's always rainy. You got raindrops sometimes on the cameras, right? You got the in-car cameras and they got the windshield wipers, and it just doesn't look as nice. But Saturday looked awesome. And look, most people that are casual sports fans, they're not going to watch the Xfinity race, but they're
Right.
going to give that Cup race a shot. And I think a lot of people did the last 2 years, but it would have been even better if you can just imagine if it was sunny and then Sunday's race as the sun is setting, you'd have seen some really, really cool visuals.
Yeah, and think you take that and compare it to, like, of course, you could never do it in downtown Manhattan, I don't guess, right? But any of those places like a Houston deal, right? Chicago's doing it, all those places. I don't think you do it in San Francisco. You might, although we did the show car deal across San Francisco Bridge and Golden Gate Bridge. I told you about that in the earlier episode. But yeah, if you, gosh, I don't know. Again, it's just trying to go into other markets. It's trying to make things exciting and more exciting. And again, the numbers don't lie. But I don't know if we could. You always thought, Charlie, if a man could patent something that would dry the racetrack, if you could just dry the racetrack, right? You had a widget that you patented, and you're like, all right, the racetrack's dry, right? And you could do that in the rain, you could become a zillionaire. But if you did that, then the whole world would change. But I'm getting off on something here. I had a thought, but I don't remember what it was now. But I don't know. It sets up other things too, Charlie. When we go to these places, we have our drivers, you have your favorites, then you go to a track like that and you have somebody like SVG won the race last year and had a shot at winning this thing this year and got taken out. And he's really, I was thinking about this during the race. He's really the first one that's come along that we call a ringer that actually makes a difference. Back when I first came in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, we go to Sears Point and Watkins Glen, or Sonoma now. And all the teams, they put an extra, a lot of the teams, they do an extra car and they bring a ringer in, what we call a road course ringer. back in those days, the Irv Harris, right? And before us, the Dan Gurneys and all that stuff, Pernelli Jones. And then you go into Borsed and all that group. And these guys would go out and practice. I remember watching this. We'd go out and practice and qualifying, and man, you'd be running, and these guys would be a second faster than you, right? And you'd qualify, and they'd out qualify your butt. And you'd be out there, and you're like, and honestly, a lot of these guys would do that, and it was a big deal. But but by the time the race was over, most of them, for the most part, I don't think any of them ever won, right? And they would relegate themselves backwards. In other words, we, the regulars, would overcome. What would happen is during the course of the race, we, the drivers, would overcome our road racing deficiencies, right? And because of the talent of the guys we had, they would end up outrunning those guys towards the end by the end of all these races. But it went on for years. It went on both racetracks, Watkins Glen and Sonoma. And over time, it seemed like kind of went away. The road race ringers, just stopped. And they talk about it on TV a lot. They stopped having that advantage. The advantage wasn't there like it used to be. Well, here all of a sudden, 20 or 30 years later, after all this stuff went away, here SVG comes along, and there's that advantage again. And what you see now with him is what we saw 30 years ago with these guys. The difference being he would still be there at the end of the race and win the race, right? So I know I got off on tangents. You were talking about drones and how pretty the background was, but I was more like into the road racing part.
Yeah, it's all good. So, okay, getting back to the actual racing part, how do you feel about the tires, the wets versus slicks? And we've seen this now, twice. I like the fact, first of all, you can get on the track quicker and don't have to sit out the rain delay as long. It obviously brings up some very interesting strategy. You saw at the end of that race there, you have Alex Bowman taking a risk. You have Tyler Reddick with a chance. He was obviously faster at the end, ran out of laps to try to catch Alex Bowman. They obviously called the race. They had it kind of timed there. But what do you think about these tires? I think it adds a new wrinkle that's pretty interesting if you enjoy the strategy of racing.
It's a big wrinkle, Charlie. And what makes it a wrinkle is if NASCAR lets the teams decide what to do. That's the key to that tire, right? That's the whole key. NASCAR says, all right, guys, you got two tires. You got the dry tire and you got the wet tire. You decide what you're going to put on, and you decide when you're going to put it on. All right. If you turn it loose like that, man, you got a million different scenarios that's going to go on each time we run these tires. If NASCAR dictates, all right, on this stop you've got to put rains, or this stop you've got to put slicks on, right? Well, when they dictate like that, you almost have to dictate that you go in the pits and put these tires on. You're going to hold your position. In other words, if you're running 10th, you come in and do this. Everybody comes in at the same time and changes the type of tire. You're going to go back out 10th, right? So they have to kind of do it that way if they're going to dictate the tire. So that throws all that could be extra strategy out the window. But if you just turn it loose, let the teams decide what they're going to do, then that gives you all these different scenarios. And let's face it, that's what won Bowman the race up there the other day, right? Gambling on the wet tire and the strategy. But so many of our races are won on strategy. And really the strategy is when they have the green, white checkers. The strategy is how do you duck the wrecks and end up front. But there's still the whole race is strategy based, and the guys that again, we talked about this before, Charlie. When the race starts, most guys look at the checkered flag, and you work that race with checkered flag back, right? So then what that does, it takes out the equation of the green, white checkers. Everything's thrown out the window. And the wet slick tire, you just can't really strategize, man. You have or ahead of time. You have to do that on the go. And anytime, and we've proved this. These teams have proved this. Anytime you've got to strategize on the run, right? It's a quick second decision that makes things better. Case in point, Bristol this year when they had the tires that were so bad, and these guys had no idea what was thrown at them. When they woke up that morning, when they threw the green flag, these crew chiefs had no idea what they were facing. And 30 laps into the race, they're like, all their heads are exploding, right? And we watched the whole race, and it made for all kinds of drama, all kinds of excitement. It was one of the neatest deals I'd ever saw or ever seen with the cup racing. And that all has to go back to curveballs being thrown at these guys that have the whole race figured out a week in advance, how we're going to do this race, right? So, anytime you throw a curveball at it, and it makes it very good, and the rain tire does that, in my opinion.
And in the Xfinity series, some big news. So Hailie Deegan parting ways with AM Racing. You kind of saw this coming with Joey Logano running her car this past weekend at Chicago. Obviously wasn't doing well, 28th in the standings. And I think there was this thought, because she was in trucks. And look, it seems like everybody just cleans everybody out in the truck series. And she was getting cleaned out a lot. And I think there was this thought that when she moved up to Xfinity, there's a little more racing. Maybe she would do better. That has not been the case. I believe she's 22 years old. So what do you think about her situation and potentially what's next for Hailie Deegan?
A couple things about that, Charlie. Number one, I'm just not one that blindly goes along with the saying, well, they were moved up too quick, or they were put in this position too quick. In some cases, yeah. I think it really goes back to the amount of talent you got. It's like in her case, maybe she's thrown in there too quick. Maybe she should have spent more time down. But a lot of times you don't develop the driver technique. You've got a technique that you've got to develop because you're with a lesser quality of driver. Okay, and when you move up, each time you move up in our sport, no matter where it is, you get into a better quality of driver that you have to compete against. And by competing against, you also learn those guys. So in her case, it could be, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe totally she moved up too quick. Maybe that is it. I don't know. But I just have trouble every time I hear that driver was moved up too quickly. Yeah. Because in my mind, I think if you're really talented and you've got it and you're smart, okay, and you study your trade, you're going to show, even though overall you're going to have problems, you're going to show glimpses of, look at here, man, look what that car is doing. Where'd they come from, right? It might be lap 112, you know what I mean, or on a certain run or a certain segment, but all of a sudden there's Hailie Deegan or whatever, they're leading, right? Or they're battling for the lead, right? And at the end of the day, they might finish 20th, but you'll see glimpses. You'll see glimpses of these things. Now, that's part one. Part two is not really to Hailie, but, basically female drivers in our sport. There is no doubt in my mind, and I have said this for years, and I know everybody else knows this, and that's one of the reasons they gravitate towards these guys. The first time the first lady comes along, female, that becomes a prolific winner in our sport, a possible champion, you are sitting on an absolute gold mine, folks. I mean, a gold mine. That particular driver person, the team owner, the team that invested in that person, the people that got behind them, it'd be like mining for gold, man, and all of a sudden you hit the big mother lode worth billions, right? It's the same way with a female driver. And to this point, that hasn't happened, right? Will it ever happen? Hell, I don't know. I mean, I look back, golly, in my career, back in the Bush days, Elton Sawyer's wife, Patty Louise, she came along, she did an admirable job in the Bush series. Gosh, if we go back to Janet Guthrie, and even Louise Smith, was that her name in the 50s, the first female driver, I think, and all through the years. And then I look at all these drivers, Wally Dallenbach's wife, Robin, just so many of these guys, and probably one of the best that I ever drove against or competed against was Shauna Robinson. I don't know if you remember that name, Shauna Robinson. She's still around. She's fighting some health issues now, but she was a very extremely talented race car driver, and for whatever reasons it didn't happen. then probably the most well-known, prolific, of course, has been Danica Patrick. And she came along and she was very marketable. Everybody in the world knew that name, and she brought GoDaddy, and she brought money into our sport. She had a team. I mean, brought money that fed crew guys for a number of years with that team she's with. And, that worked. But the problem is she didn't, she wasn't competitive. It wasn't from a lack of trying. I didn't know Danica. That spoke to her a couple of times, but I knew the guys that worked with her. They all said she had the desire and the want to and the work ethic to make it happen. But, for whatever reasons, it didn't happen. So, the deal with Hailie, she's the next young female star that we're going to promote and try to make happen. And guess what, Charlie? It didn't happen. Or to this point, it hasn't happened. Not saying it's over for her. I mean, hopefully she'll be the next big deal, right? But so far it hadn't happened.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with her as well is, look, she is so marketable. You have her dad,
Yeah.
Brian Danger Deegan, going back to the X Games. Look, she's a very attractive young woman. She has a huge following here on YouTube. She brings sponsors. You have Monster Energy and all that. And we all know, look, there are some male drivers who maybe have their rides because they can be attached to money and sponsors and all that. And maybe they're not one of the top 36 or 40 drivers that should be in Cup or Xfinity or whatever it is. So I guess my question is kind of, even if you're acknowledging that she's not ready yet, right? That she's not there yet. I do think there's an interesting balance in what she brings to the sport in terms of eyeballs and maybe young girls and her YouTube following. I would think even if she's not running up front, it's definitely good for the sport if she's in it. And I would think NASCAR would want to keep her in it.
I agree. The marketability of what she brings. I mean, you hit on the points that makes her viable. It makes some of these people like her viable, right? I mean, all the points you just made are very valid points, and we need that. We use that. We can use that to our advantage, and there's no doubt. But the downside is there are people then that within the sport are like, well, she's taking money away from somebody that could really shine with it, right? And I know. I remember I go back a little bit to the Bush days, and I mentioned Patty Mawiese a while ago. Patty Mawiese was very heavily promoted by different factions in our sport, one being Buick, all right, Buick Automotive Division. And Buick, she was on a Buick deal, and they supplied, a lot of stuff for her career. And she had done rail and road racing. Well, what ended up happening with Patty, a lot of folks, there was animosity in the garage area because they're looking at Patty and saying, well, man, she's got that Buick deal going, right? Gets free motors and all the stuff she gets. That could be going to somebody that could be going to me, right? Not me personally, Rick, but I'm just saying that was kind of the mindset that some of the folks I remember had, and they're like, animosity, dude, jealousy, right? She's taking money that could be used for actually winning races, right? Well, yeah, but our sport is it's a little bit more than just winning races. It's a marketability. It's the fans, the involvement. And you're exactly right. Hailie and her background and her looks and the whole deal, hopefully she'll get a shot and stay at this thing a little while, because there's no doubt Danica Patrick brought value. There's absolutely no doubt she did that. But the core of our sport is racing. The core of racing is winning. All right. And I think when you lose sight of that and you start thinking about other things that bring value, then I think it starts taking away a little bit from our sport and what our core values are, right? Not to be taken away from what they bring and what they do. Danica, Hailie, and all those guys. And I get it. I understand that. But still, you've got to be a race car driver first, right? I mean, it's kind of like, I don't care if you're a black race car driver, right? You're not to succeed and to do well. You're not a black race car driver. You're a race car driver that happens to be black, right? And if you stick to that core part, man, if you become successful, you just explode as a personality, right? And because you're back to the core of what our sport is, and that's racing and winning. Although I get it. I get the marketability side and what it brings. Totally with you on that, Charlie. But we cannot ever lose sight of the fact of what we do and what it's about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That
Okay.
was
All right.
very
Okay.
well said. Good
All right.
stuff. Okay, so next week I think we should focus a lot on obviously Brickyard, and you can tell all your stories from being on the pole for the first one, and I think people are really looking forward to that. We also have this weird 2-week break for the Olympics coming up after that, but let's not skip Pocono. Just give us your thoughts on Pocono. Any good stories from over the years?
Yeah, Pocono, man. In 88 or 89, we ran the Busch Series, ran Nazareth, Pennsylvania, the first time, and I went up there, man, and won the race. Ran real well, right? The next year we go back, and I'm leading the race, and have a master cylinder freezes up, and I lose the race because of that. The first time I go to Pocono and I go make a couple laps, I'm like, this is exactly like Nazareth, except it's 10 miles longer, right? I mean, to me, it just felt like an old Nazareth, Pennsylvania track. It was a triangle or whatever they call that thing, right? But Pocono is one of those tracks that Rick Mast just loved. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it was, but I just always loved that racetrack, man. And it might have been the guy that used to stand out on the side of the road with the horns. You probably don't remember that or know about it, but there was a guy for years. When you go in there, he was standing out, and he had a I don't know, some kind of hat on deal, big old wolf hat, or I don't know what it was, but anyhow, it had horns coming out of it, right? And he would stand there at the gates and wave all of us in, and he'd wave all of us out, right? And it was a neat deal, but it would always rain at Pocono, right? It would always do. I remember one time there we were practicing, man, and it got to raining. It stopped raining, and it was foggy. And I forget the team. I think it was Derek Cope driving for one of Bob Johnson's cars. And I looked up, and they were pulling out of the garage area, had a big spotlight, flashlight spotlight taped to the roof, right? Just taped to the roof, shining forward. I mean, it was a joke, but it was a light, like fog light, taped to the roof of this car to go out to see how to race. But I don't know. The Pocono, and I would tell people all the time, they'd ask me how you get around there. Harry Gant taught me how to get around there. The turn 3 or the last turn. See, Pocono has, Charlie, the longest, my hat straight, man. What the hell happens to my hat? Golly, my Atlanta Braves World Series hat. But Pocono has the longest straightaway on the circuit. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, front stretch is the longest straightaway on our race circuit, believe that or not. So, but anyhow, Bobby Allison landed his plane there one time up there testing. He would land on the front straightaway when they were up there testing once years ago. So anyhow, you got turn 3, and you come off turn 3, and that puts you into the straightaway, right? So the faster you go through turn 3, the faster you go down that long straightaway, which is the longest straightaway in NASCAR. So the track, if you talk about the track, turns 3 is completely different from turns 1 and 2, or turn 1. There went my phone. Sorry. Anyhow. So do you set your car, if your car is neutral in 3, it's going to push in 2 in turn 1. So where do you set your car up to be best at? We're always the mindset, set it up to be fast in turn 3, because if you come off the turn 3 a mile an hour faster, then you carry that mile an hour one more faster mile an hour, you carry that mile an hour down the longest straightaway on our circuit. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? And you would do that stuff. And Harry Gant was a master of that. Tim Richmond was good at that, right? Back in the day. And then Earnhardt was very good at that deal. But Harry was the master of that. Yeah.
All right. So while we're on the story time conversation with Pocono, Rick's weekly story time. Anything coming to your mind?
Let's see. I thought about this with the announcement of Josh Berry going to the Wood Brothers. Mm-hmm. So we haven't really covered that, but I think it's a great deal. I think it's a great deal for Berry. I think it's a great deal for the Wood Brothers, right? The Wood Brothers going through their transformation now, with Eddie and Lynn kind of stepping back, and John and Kevin, and I forgot her name now. Never will. But anyhow, taking over the the range, so to speak. With him going there, so many people that wanted to see Rodney Childers go with Josh there. And when they announced Barry going there, and they didn't announce Rodney going right immediately, I was like, well, I don't believe he's going there because, well, I don't know this. I'm just speculating as somebody from 10,000 feet above. That's a Penske organization deal, and I don't know. Rodney felt like maybe he wanted to be in that type of situation. Nothing wrong with Penske. They're great, right? But personalities have to match or have to. So anyhow, he ends up with Spire. And where does Spire get all the money? I got to find out this. I got to find out where this thing is coming from. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I will get the information on all that. But anyhow, for Rodney, I'm real happy for him getting that deal, and it seems like it's going to be good, and he's happy with it. Did a little private message with him. Seems to be happy. But with the Wood Brothers, what were we talking about? Oh, the story. Yeah, the story. The Wood Brothers. You're right. Right. Yeah, I'll get back to the story in a minute. But, Lynn and Eddie, and going back to Leonard and the guys before that, just most well-respected people in the garage area. My story is we're at Sears Point or Sonoma. Oh, gosh, I guess it had been 97 or 98. Which is really, this is kind of prelude really to the end of my career once you look back on it. But we ran that race. That was in the 75, the Remington car. The race is over, wore out, tired, okay. We go back, catch a shower somewhere, go straight to the airport, hop on the airplane, basically a red eye coming home. And all of a sudden the heebie-jeebies hit me, man. Next thing I know, I'm laying in the floor of the back of this airplane, right? I'll never forget, there's a doctor leaning over me. He was drunk, right? I could smell the alcohol. And he kept telling him, this man's in trouble. Got to land the airplane, right? Well, they land in Denver in the middle of the night. And you got to remember, this whole plane is full of racers, right? It's not a charter, it's a regular plane. And as it turns out, I had an incredible amount of carbon monoxide in my system. Okay. I forget that particular hospital visit, but it's all in my medical records. And when I was going through my deal years later and the doctors were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, went through all my medical records, that particular night, that particular ER stay came up on my records, and it showed percent of carbon monoxide in my system. And it was an ungodly number, right? I remember those guys at the clinic looked at that and said, "They know what? There's no way, Rick. You should have been dead. You should have been dead." Well, I had 4 or 5 other ER visits with numbers similar to that, right? So anyhow, and I'm laying there and I'm like, man, I know what's wrong with me. Just leave me the hell alone. You don't land the plane. Just get us home. I'll be okay. Leave me alone. Well, this doctor again was drunk, and he was just doing what he thought he should be doing, I reckon. And anyhow, they landed the plane in Denver. They come in there. Everybody's trying to sleep. It's a red eye. And all the racers are all pissed off anyhow because they didn't do well, right? And I'm at the very back of the plane. They come in there and they wheel me. They put me in a wheelchair or something. They wheel me all down through the plane in front of all my peers, right? And I'm laying there with the mask on and looking like this, like I'm dead, and everybody. I can remember going by and the people gasping. Damn, that's Rick. That's Rick. What's wrong, Rick? Oh my God. Oh, this type of deal, right? Well, anyhow, so we get off the plane, and they ambulance me to the hospital. They do the deal there to me, and they do the deal they always do. They give you fluids, give you a bunch of oxygen. You're there a few hours or however long it takes to get all your numbers right, and then they release you. Well, the lady, her name was Pam Miller. She was my PR lady that worked for the 75 team at Remington. She had it all worked out, man. As soon as I got released from the ER, we were able to catch a flight at the airport, right? And I remember flying back. Well, I had the hub in Pittsburgh. We flew back to Pittsburgh, and from Pittsburgh, I would fly to Roanoke, and she would go to Charlotte. I'd go to Roanoke to go home. I'll never forget. And she had it first class, dude. That was a cool deal. And right beside me was Bill Coward, the football coach from the Steelers, right? So nice. I got to meet Bill Coward doing this deal. Nice guy, man. You know what I mean? Just very nice guy. But anyhow, so I get back home. My plane gets back home. before the original plane that I was on gets to Charlotte.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Or before Eddie and Lynn Wood get back. I'm back in Virginia before they're back in Carolina. Every time I go to the racetrack, if I see those two, they'll holler. I'll holler. I want to say hi, and I'll try to say hi, but as long as there's somebody standing there, it doesn't matter who, they immediately go fussing into that story. Let me tell you what this so-and-so son of a did to us when we come back, blah, blah, blah. And that son of a beat us home. The Eddie and Lynn it's the funniest story to listen to. If you're ever at the racetrack and you see me, Lynn, and Eddie Wood together, come over there real quick because you're going to hear this story again. I've heard it 1,000 freaking times, right? And it's just as funny now as it was then. Well, at the time it wasn't funny, but anyhow, that's my story time for the week with those guys. But anyhow, that was a prelude, Charlie, to what finally took me out of the sport years later.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. Obviously, maybe that's a good I think topic. Again, we have this 2-week break, so next week we'll be all over Indy, and then we'll have 2 weeks with no racing. That's probably a good one of those weeks we can really dive into that. How about what's pissing off Rick Mast these days? Anything? Or are you feeling pretty good?
I'm feeling pretty good about things, Charlie. I had something come up earlier, and I done forgot what that is. But you know what really gripes my ass right now is this friggin' heat. Golly, and it shouldn't piss me off because it's been hot every summer since we've had summers, right? Since the beginning, but golly bum, man. And it's like the sun. It's like right now the sun just beats on us harder. And if you go down some of this tinfoil stuff out there in the social media world, golly bun. I mean, they've been doing the what's it called? The jets. They put out stuff in the jet stream. They're putting all that stuff out.
The chemtrails.
Yeah, chemtrails. You go down. If you go down that road, you go outside and the sun beats on you. Like, oh yeah, I think I believe in this chemtrail deal, right? But golly bum, man, you can't go outside, you can't do anything. And I tell you, when I noticed, was it last week, the guys were having trouble with the heat. That was in Nashville, right? And a lot of the guys they seemed like they had more trouble Saturday than they did Sunday. But I'm not sure how many people use cool suits on Saturday. And but I tell you, that was in my deal, Charlie. Honestly, that was one of my deals that I worked on hard. I mean, I went to, when I got my first Cup career deal. I mean, first time I got in a Cup car, or not the first time, but we were at Dover. I was in DK Ulrich's car, and I was used to running 200 lap or 200-mile bush races. We'd run a bush race at Dover, and I drove his car on Sunday. The bush race is 200 laps. Dover, the Cup race is 500 laps, and I got in his car running. And it was hot that day. God, it's miserable hot. And we were running. And man, I started getting hot. I'm like, good Lord of mercy. Well, we probably, we shouldn't be 100 laps left, right? Well, we can make this all right. I look up, we'd run like 230 laps, which we weren't even halfway yet, right in the back. Oh, crap. Mercifully enough, something happened to the car, and I fell out of the race. The racing gods were looking after me that day. But anyhow, when I got the Cup full time, I used a guy by the name of Joe Geek, well-renowned athletic trainer across the country, and he was athletic trainer for University of Virginia. He set me up on my program, okay, in 1990, really, that I used that program my whole career. You know what I mean? The workout program. And it actually turned me into an athlete. You wouldn't know it now, right? But, at one time, man, I was a finely tuned athlete. I mean, the body fat was down. My cardiovascular was good. I could run. I could do a bunch of stuff, right? But the one thing that I started doing it on my own. When it was so hot, a lot of times I had an open face helmet, and I had these 2 blocks of lead, and I taped these blocks of lead to the side of my helmet. I would ride around during the week, in the passenger car, riding up and down 39 to Lexington, which is a real curvy deal. I'd ride around with that helmet on with the lid on there, trying to get my neck muscles. I would do it in the wintertime, getting ready for, of course, you lay off, right? Once the season started, I didn't do that, but I would do that a lot. In fact, I still got the helmet back here in one of my showroom deal or trophy room deals. We'll show you that sometime in the future. But in the summer times, a lot during those time periods, I would ride around during the week with the windows up and the heater on. If it was 90 degrees outside, I'd ride around in my car with the windows up. And a lot of times the heater's on. I would do it till I just absolutely couldn't breathe, right? And then I would roll the window down or whatever. I did that a lot. Just getting my body acclimated to the heat, right? I mean, everybody did different things. I mean, Mark Martin, he had no muscle mass, so he had to do the weight things so very hard. He was diligent at it. You know, Earnhardt put up hay every day. You know what I mean? Or worked his cattle, which I did that too. But he did his farm, and some guys didn't have to do a thing, right? And then some guys had to work real hard at it. But the heat was the big deal. It was always the big deal for all the drivers, and it still holds true today. That's like, is somebody in the Xfinity race, I guess that was in Nashville, that the cool suit thing quit working and they had to stop and do all this stuff. I had that happen one time, Charlie. The cool suit is just a vest with little tiny capillaries in it, and it's an ER emergency room thing. They tell me what it was all about. So you got a cooler in the floorboard. You put dry ice in it and water. A pump, it pumps into this vest and it runs cold water all through these little capillaries that you've got vested around you. And what happens, it happened to me one time, actually at Dover, the thing quit working, right? Well, you're sitting there now, it's like no cool water flowing through this thing. Now you're sitting there with water that's insulating your body, and your body can't cool. The water turns steaming hot. It's getting hot from the outside. Your body temperature is making it hot, and all of a sudden you're getting ready to get in trouble. Okay, and like in my case, I finally had to stop, unbelt, get the suit down, and get that thing off of me, right? Because your body, you're going to die. You're just going to die. You can't. It just don't work, right? And somebody had to. I don't know what type of systems they're using now, how it works, but whatever the deal is, it quit working on somebody's deal at Nashville because he had trouble with that.
All right, let's end on this. I saw some of the video from the great Rick Mast Farm 4th of July extravaganza. It looked like you had some, or I don't even know if we should talk about this, but you know, somebody had some really nice fireworks.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, dude. We there are different markets for everything out there in the world. There are different markets for fireworks, dude. You just got to know where to go and you know who to talk to get the right ones. And also, I'll tell you something else. Damn things aren't cheap. Golly, they're expensive. But anyhow, man, we had a whole group. Each year we try to, you know, we have friends come over. We have the pool party. Thing starts like at 1 or 2 o'clock. The stragglers come in all day, right? But most of the time, by nighttime, everybody shows up because they know they're going to get a pretty good fireworks show for a home fireworks show.
Yeah.
The funniest part, I got three of my buddies back there setting them off this time, right? And we're watching them. You can look back and you see the lighters when they light, right? And you know, you see the little glow, and you know, the one's getting ready to go up. They're doing it one time, and I seen something spark. And all of a sudden, it lit up, and all I could see was asses and elbows. Man, those 3 guys were scattered. One of the things that turned over, and that crap was shooting every which way, right? And they were running and hollered. Luckily, nobody got hurt. But more importantly, luckily, it didn't set off the remaining fireworks, right? Because that we would have fired those 3 guys had that deal screw up, messed up the rest of our fireworks show. They'd have been kicked off the mass fire and not allowed to come back. I'm telling you, it wouldn't happen. But yeah, a lot of fun, dude. A lot of fun. Celebrating our nation's independence. The right way.
I love it. Yeah, you know what? It's funny. So I guess it was the day before. So the day before 4th of July. So here in St. Louis, you got to drive out west a little bit to buy the fireworks. You gotta drive out I-44 out to Eureka or Pacific. So I stopped at the first fireworks store, and I had my son with me at the time. So my son's 3, and it's pretty funny. So I wasn't even getting big stuff. I was getting nothing like you had, but just kind of firecrackers, some stuff maybe the kids would like, some of the sparklers and the things they can pop on the ground that kids can enjoy and be safe with and all that. And what I found really funny is, so my son's walking around the shop, and he's in heaven because like they're really, you can tell they're marketing a lot of these fireworks towards kids. Like everything is like a truck or a dinosaur or a panda bear, right? Like it's a truck that moves, but it shoots out, or it's a dinosaur that breathes fire, or a dragon. And so my son's like, I want this, I want this, I want this. He wanted everything.
Yeah, I think my fascination comes back from my dad. We're talking about dad. He built Natural Bridge Speedway, which is still up and going today in 1967, right? He and my uncle actually. And they would do fireworks show July 4th when I was a little kid. That was one of the things that fascinated me about being in racing and all. Anyhow, so he did a fireworks deal one year. Well, they did it for probably 4 or 5 years. But I remember, all you fireworks experts, what he did, he took like, it was a piece of 4-inch channel iron, right? And maybe 10 feet long, a stick of it. Then he would put this pipe, maybe, 2-inch pieces of pipe, maybe, I don't know, a foot tall. He welded it to that channel iron, right? About every 2 feet, there would be this piece of pipe. And on this 10-foot piece of channel iron, so you'd have like 5 or 6 pieces, little pipe on each piece of channel iron. Then he had a whole bunch of those channel irons, and he'd set those things down on the ground and line them up down through the pit area, right? I mean, he probably had, I don't know, to me, looking back as a kid, seemed like 1,000 feet of it, but it wasn't that much. But it was pretty large, pretty tremendous. And the fireworks would set down in these little pieces of pipe, and they were all kind of gigged together somehow to where you'd light one end and the things would go off. And I'm talking big time fireworks, dude, the stuff you see now, right? And they would go off. And anyhow, he worked real hard at that, making that thing a pretty cool deal. And it was a cool deal. And it was expensive then too. For him, as frugal as he was, I was always surprised that he did that because, my dad was so frugal. I mean, he would go down to McDonald's here in home. He would buy a senior citizen's meal and make him give him he'd buy a kid's meal and make him give him the senior citizen's discount, right? That's how frugal he was, and it worked. And, so looking back about the fireworks, but anyhow, that's a story about fireworks that you probably didn't need to know, but I told you anyhow. So now you know.
Yes, and knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe. I remember that at the end of all the shows growing up as a kid. This was fun, Rick. We hit on a lot of topics, and we'll do it again next week. We'll really talk about your great Brickyard inaugural stories, and we'll break down the Pocono race and all that. And then, we'll have a couple of weeks with this NASCAR Olympic break to really get deep into the Rick Mast story time, which should be fun.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff to talk about next couple of weeks, Charlie. It's going to be fun. A lot of cool stuff people haven't heard before. Yeah, about Indy and all. Yeah, we'll do it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, share the show, share the channel, put it in your group text, share it on social media. Let's keep this thing rolling. We just surpassed, last week or 2 weeks ago, 100,000 subscribers. I think that plaque is actually being delivered to Kenny's house this morning. So pretty good.
That's so cool. That is so neat, man. Take a goofball like Kenny Wallace to do that, and then add a goofball like me to it to help a little bit. A little bit I can do. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, but it's cool. And it's fun, man. That's what this thing's about. Kenny Wallace is fun. People love Kenny Wallace. That's the reason you guys have been successful, right? And it's just a fun deal. It's not a complicated scenario. It's not a complicated situation, right? It's
That's
just
right.
Having fun and being honest, man. That's all it's about, which is life. So, but anyhow, I digress. See you next week, guys.
All right. See ya.